he grew up. He ages really rapidly. So yeah.
Remember that movie?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Filipino Freethinkers podcast. That's also a video. I'm Red,
And I'm Talia.
and today we're talking about something that a lot of you who are on social media or who's watched any news shows today have probably heard about. It's Robin Williams and his apparent suicide due to
Depression.
depression. And we're going to talk about the reactions to it and everything that we can think about that's
Yes.
related to this topic. Now, it's kind of difficult to talk about this because he's someone who's influenced a lot of people, mostly in a very positive way.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the usual trope of the clown, the sad clown. This is a popular trope. There's this popular story. I don't know. Have you heard of this story of the clown who? Well, that kind of spoils it a bit. But there's this guy who approaches a doctor, a psychologist, a therapist. I don't remember what exactly. Have you heard of this? Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay, so he says, "Doctor, I'm kind of sad. I think I'm depressed. Like, would you recommend anything to me to cheer me up?" And then the doctor says, "There's this guy. He's very funny. You should see his show. It's on Friday at this place." And but doctor, says the patient, I'm that clown. I'm that comedian. So I think this typifies a lot of the performers, not only comedians and actors like Robin Williams, but a lot of other performers.
Yes.
Did you know? I didn't. I'm not even sure if this is correct, but I remember reading somewhere that for performers they have like a double the rate of their suicides are double the rest of the population. It's like 1.5% for the rest of the population, and for performers it's 3%. So it's I think significantly higher if you're a performer. I'm not sure if this is suicide or depression, but I think it's both are higher in performers. And before we talk about why this could be, what are the reactions that you have read or heard from your friends?
Of course, there's the sadness from everyone. He influenced a lot of childhoods. But also, I see a couple who are saying that it was a very selfish move for him to commit suicide. And of course,
Really, on your friends said this?
I wouldn't call them friends, but I
Okay.
have
They're
seen
no longer friends.
people say that it was a selfish move for him because he has 3 children who are actually adults now. But he has 3 children that he left behind. He has a widow now. And they're saying that he's very selfish for having killed himself, given that he has a family and he has so many fans
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah, and there's one thing that kind of irks me a bit is that obligatory Pinoy Pride article about his
Oh, yes.
ex-wife, who's half Filipina or part
Half
Filipina,
Filipina.
and of course the daughter who's
A quarter.
a quarter Filipina.
Yes.
So, other than that, I think my friends on Facebook are pretty. It's pretty much a bubble now. Like, I didn't see anyone like mention the things that you mentioned, and I didn't see people saying that he's going to hell, which apparently is a very popular response still for the more fundamentalist and dogmatic Christians, and even people from other religions as well, because it is part of the doctrine that suicide is one of the mortal sins, and the mortal sin unconfessed gets you to hell when you die. And of course, when you die, like
That's
the
it.
sin that you cannot confess after you commit it. Or maybe maybe an attempt at suicide, you can confess that so that the mortal sin goes away. But if you're successful at suicide, it's something that you cannot confess later on. And so even if, like the Catholic Church says, we don't really consign people to hell anymore, we don't do that anymore, it's in the doctrine, it's in canon law that
Yes.
hell is a real thing, and mortal sins will probably get you to hell. And it reminds me of this movie. Have you seen this movie? It's called, okay, spoiler alert, you can skip maybe 10 seconds if you don't want to hear the title of this movie. It's Bridge to Terabithia.
No.
It's actually a popular children's book. I think it's a children's book. And it's about this very endearing character who she makes friends with this guy. They have an amazing time together. They create a fantasy world together, and then she dies. Right? She dies not because of a suicide, but she dies not having the religion that would save her. And this caused trouble to this friend who's a guy, and he keeps on asking, like, did this person go to hell? And it just reminds me of how a lot of people, when they hear these Christians talk about suicide and how it, condemns people as kind. Of course, we don't know Robin Williams, but from everything that I've read about this person, he's a kind, a warm, a gentle person, and he wouldn't be someone who you'd think would deserve to be tortured in hell for the rest of eternity.
Exactly.
But apparently, a lot of people still believe this. And that's the extreme side. Did you see people on your wall mentioning the whole suicide and hell angle?
It could be that I'm in a bubble, but I didn't see that. Even the parts of him being selfish, I would see them in rants by my friends telling people, stop saying this, stop saying this.
Yeah.
So it could just be that I'm not seeing it. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who are fundamentalists and will think that because it is written in canon law.
Yeah.
But honestly, it could just be that this is an older generation.
Yeah. And the people nowadays, I think, they see hell not as it is described in canon law or by the more conservative Catholics, but they see it as a kind of metaphor, not a real thing. But just a reminder, the Catholic Church still believes that hell is a very real thing. Yes. And I'm sure a lot of religious people will grapple with this idea again because of what happened to Robin Williams. But that's beside the point. The main focus here is suicide and, of course, depression. Now, let's talk about what you mentioned a while ago about how people think that it's a selfish thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
I hear this from I've been seeing this from a lot of people who probably don't know what depression's like, or who have never experienced or have never heard of friends going through depression or suffering from it. And I think that they imagine it from their perspective, not having these problems, and they think, hey, my life is pretty good. I would find it really selfish if I left my family behind, which given their perspective, is perfectly reasonable. But it also doesn't take into account what this other person is experiencing, be it chemical imbalances, really difficult problems, or whatever. Like, it could be perfectly justified to this other person, and you can't, tell everyone that their reasoning is off, because you can't say that you've walked in their shoes. Yeah,
and you mentioned about reasoning, right? A lot of people, psychologists, actually think that the people who are really depressed, clinically depressed, their ability to reason is not the same as someone who's in a more healthy state. Because you can't really keep people from projecting their own experience, because that's really all they have. Which is why when it comes to sensitive issues like this, I recommend that other people, like our audience, read about the experience of people and take their word for it. They wouldn't make this stuff up.
Exactly.
Like, what would it benefit them, right?
Exactly.
Watch this video by Stephen Fry, and he discusses and describes depression in a good way. And that's another actor, performer, who has experienced depression and who has had suicidal thoughts before. And you watch him, you read his stuff, and he's a very creative, very intelligent person.
Yes.
But still, depression and suicidal thoughts gets to him.
Yes.
And that's a point that I think a lot of people do not understand. That depression does not discriminate. It happens to the best of us. Sure, if you're poor, if you're existentially insecure, if everything's going to shit around you, right? Like, I can only imagine the people in places like Gaza, for instance.
Yes.
Or Israel. And,
Israel.
I imagine that the rate of depression would increase in places like, despair could be a very real thing there. But even people, even the actors who have no money problems, who have
Who seem to have it all.
who seem there you go who seem to have it all, they can be depressed as well. And there are a number of factors. It's it could be genetic, it could be environmental, but one thing's for sure, it doesn't help to blame them.
Exactly.
It's not their fault. And what can we do, to to help people who are depressed? Okay, for one thing, I think I also do this myself. I take the word depression lightly. Like, when you're very, very sad, it's very easy to say, I'm depressed.
Yes.
I'm extremely sad. This situation feels hopeless. Therefore, I'm depressed. And I talk about it in these terms. Now, of course, you can use whatever words you like. But I think this kind of sentiment trivializes the depression that other people have, the clinically depressed. And when people who are clinically depressed say that I have a condition, I'm depressed, the tendency of other people is to respond in that, oh, I've had that too. Yeah, I've been depressed and I got over it. This is what I did. I watched.
I went jogging.
Yeah, I went jogging. I focused on the good things. I looked on the bright side of life, and the next day, I'm healthy again. And it kind of does not work that way. It doesn't work that way. The way that people who are clinically depressed deal with their issues ranges from taking psychotropic drugs to getting therapy to a mixture of this. But of course, a support network could only help.
Yes.
And, destigmatizing depression, not blaming people for having it, not having misconceptions about it, is, I think, one of the few things that you could do to help people who have this condition.
Of course, I wouldn't blame the people who are probably at their lowest point or whatever, or a particularly difficult time. I wouldn't blame them for using a word that they might think is appropriate for their time.
Yeah.
But they also have to understand that sometimes, even if they think it's the right word, it's an entirely different thing when put into a clinical context.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I'm sure that people who have gone through bouts of depressive states, or so they'd think, for days or hours, they probably weren't clinically diagnosed, and odds are they might not have ever felt what people who are going through clinical depression are going through.
Yeah.
And it's not always in their control. Usually it actually isn't.
Yeah. And don't take our word for it. We're not experts on this matter. If you think that you could be depressed, then you need to be diagnosed by a professional. And I'm sure there are people, there are family or friends who could refer some people to you. Or here's a link. It's good that the Department of Health released this infographic about depression. Here's a link to that, or maybe we'll flash it on the screen and you could pause and read it if you like. And so those are the few things. Now, why do you think that these creative people, like Stephen Fry, like Robin Williams, like other people who have depression or who have committed suicide? I read this one article that said he personally knows like around 8 or 9, I don't remember the number, people who have committed suicide.
Okay.
And so I think that's pretty high.
It is.
And so in their profession, it's kind of a risk that probably, is it the profession that drives them to do this, or is it something in them that drove them to have that kind of profession? What do you think?
Honestly, I don't think we have enough of a sample. Like, we haven't done studies on this.
Yeah.
It could be a factor of the limelight that they're in, the environment, always being watched.
The pressure, yeah.
The pressure that's on them. It could be that certain personalities or certain kinds of people are drawn to the attention. It could be that the attention makes them feel better. It could be a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's really difficult to be...
Yeah. There's no template for suicidal...
Yes.
or performers who commit suicide.
Yes.
So, just speculating. I think when people expect you to be this comedian who brings so much light to the world, they don't expect that there could be darkness too.
Yes.
And when you're always smiling, when you always project this persona, it can be pretty easy to forget that darkness can affect them too. And people think, oh, Robin's gonna be fine. I mean, how could he not be?
Exactly. He's
He
always
has everything.
happy.
Yeah, and that brings us back to the point that depression does not discriminate.
That's
And what people project is different from how people could actually be. You know how people are on Facebook, all of the posts that you see, they could actually be depressed. I read a study that said that people who are in a depressed or lonely state tend to actually post more on Facebook and more happy things to try to counterbalance that kind of thing.
Actually, even with Robin Williams, if you look at some of his past interviews, you'll see him mentioning that he's been sad lately or that he's not afraid to be sad.
Yeah.
He will say things like this, and people would just brush it off because, it's Robin Williams. He's always happy. Of course, he would brush off being sad. It's not like it happens to him often.
Yeah.
Even his publicist said that he's been battling severe depression for a very long time. So even his family, they weren't extremely surprised. Of course, they were devastated.
Yeah.
But, it was something that they'd been dealing with for a long time.
So, in Robin's case, like it wasn't so surprising, but a lot of people are actually surprised when people do it, and of course, ultimately, it's still surprising, and as you said, devastating. So, how should we respond when someone seems depressed or seems or even says outright that they're thinking of suicide?
Usually, what we're told when we're studying psychology is that when someone tells you this or confides this, you should take it seriously because you do not want to be that person who laughed it off. You don't want to be the 90th person who laughed it off and was the last person to have heard it. I mean, if you know the person and you know that it's something they would confide in you, it's still the best option to take it seriously and to try to help them through it. Try to do your part. Do your best to make them feel like there's someone there for them. And if ever, you can look up sites or possible people.
Is there a suicide hotline that people can
Actually, there are. We can link here.
Okay, there you go. And again, seek the treatment of professionals.
Yes.
And don't try to solve the problem yourself. It's too much of a burden both on you and the person to tackle it just between the two of you. Like I said earlier, a support network helps. And like online, people who have a very similar situation, it's very easy to reach them nowadays. Maybe you could help your friend to at least know that they're not alone in dealing with something as difficult as this. So, what's your favorite Robin Williams movie?
Bicentennial Man.
Oh, that's very interesting. Mine, I think, is either Good Will Hunting or Dead Poet Society.
Oh,
but I have I really loved Hook. I mean, it's a very fun movie, and I keep on wanting to watch it, and maybe I will. And we'll talk about Robin Williams and all of the things that he's done, depression and suicide, and as topics at the next meetup, which is happening this
17th.
weekend, August 17th.
That's a Sunday.
Yeah, we hope to see you there, and thank you for watching. Bye.